If you've been following the story of Stoke Lodge playing fields, you'll know that over several weeks from late January to early March 2019, Cotham School installed a 1.5 kilometre long, 2 metre high fence around the playing field area. You'll know that there were sustained protests by the community, which thankfully helped to protect some of the beautiful old trees on the site as far as we were able, and kept the fence further away from protected wildlife. Our community did a fantastic job of protecting this space against huge odds. Now, that shouldn't have been necessary if a planning application had been made and the issues had been considered beforehand. And in fact, as recently as July 2018, Bristol City Council officers considered the Stoke Lodge estate in detail and confirmed to the school that a planning application would be required if it wanted to put up a fence. And yet just a few months later, the school published a press release saying that it had worked with the council and had confirmation that it could go ahead without any planning application or other form of approval. So the question is, what changed? Why did the council make this U-turn? Well, we still don't have all the answers, but we know enough to tell you some of what happened in those 4 months from July to November 2018. I'm going to show you some of the correspondence so you can judge for yourself. Obviously, there's been a long history to the Stoke Lodge issue, but this part of the story starts on the 25th of May 2018, when Cotham School announced plans to erect a 2 metre high black perimeter fence around the area of its lease, even though the lease is expressly subject to all existing rights and use, including use by the community. In response to concerns from residents and councillors, Gary Collins, BCC's Head of Development Management, oversaw a coordinated officer response that resulted in confirmation that the playing fields were the curtilage of Stoke Lodge. Curtilage means the open space that forms one enclosure with a listed building, and there are restrictions on what can be done under permitted development rights within or on the boundary of curtilage land. The school was informed that it would need to make a planning application in relation to its proposed fence in a letter dated the 13th of July 2018 from the Director of Finance. That letter goes into some detail about the assessments that would be required alongside any planning application for a fence, including a design and access statement, ecology and tree surveys, a heritage statement, and a statement of community involvement. It notes that the school's application is more likely to be successful if it can demonstrate maximised recreation space available outside the fenced area, a fencing design that acknowledges and responds to the historic parkland character of the site, and discussion with the local community about the qualities of the recreational open space that would be available to them. Clearly, that wasn't what the school wanted to hear. The school had a meeting with planning officers on the 3rd of August, principally to discuss its rejected application for planning permission for a new pavilion at Stoke Lodge. At this meeting, council officers also agreed to review information provided by the school's planning consultants about the issue of curtilage. The letter from the school's planning consultants is dated the 17th of August 2018. This letter becomes quite important because it was used to trigger a review by BCC's internal legal team and then to get advice from a barrister, on the basis of which Gary Collins, the Head of Development Management, has said he changed his view on curtilage. That is the view he had reached with the full officer team only a few weeks earlier. He's been very clear it was this letter and the barrister's advice that made him change his mind. We'll come back to that next time, but for now you must be wondering, what was in the letter that was so powerful? What was the new evidence that caused this hugely significant change of view? Well, the answer is nothing. Really, nothing. The letter makes 2 main points. First, it disagrees with the view reached by BCC in July by reference to factors like use, ownership and physical layout. And secondly, it says that it's inconsistent to treat the land as curtilage because, to date, no application has been restricted by curtilage listing. Taking the second point first, the planning team should easily have been able to see the error. For example, you only have to look on the Bristol Planning portal to find multiple applications all around the Stoke Lodge estate that record the removal of permitted development rights, because the whole estate has consistently been treated as curtilage, one enclosure. So that's the second half of the letter dealt with. It's just not true. As for the first point, the consultant submitted a number of historic maps that, it said, demonstrate that the land was not the curtilage of the building, but was used for farming and other purposes, like allotment gardens. But you only have to look at some of those maps to see that most of the estate has the official map shading for wooded parkland. It wasn't agricultural fields. And the marking for allotment gardens is in an area that's actually outside the Stoke Lodge boundary, so either the writer couldn't read the map or didn't know where Stoke Lodge starts and ends. There are many more errors in this letter, but we don't have time to go into them all now. The thing is, any legal advice that assumes that this material is correct must itself be hugely flawed. This is no foundation for changing the council's view on curtilage. It's a catalogue of errors submitted on behalf of an interested party. Remember, at this point, no one but the school knew that the planning team was even looking at this issue again, so no one had the chance to provide proper evidence. It's not even clear that the BCC Heritage team was involved, as they had been in July. And later, when we offered additional evidence, our offer was simply ignored. As far as we can tell, the planning team proceeded on the basis of misread maps and incorrect statements. So what happened next? More private meetings between the planning team and the school, with the school appearing increasingly happy with how it was being treated. By the 22nd of September, the school's lead governor on this project was emailing the planning team to say, "You are now going to work positively with Cotham to enable us to get back to our playing fields as soon as possible." And once the school had been informed of the council's newly adopted view about curtilage, this governor writes, "Cotham is keen to show we are working together at last and not give the community a chink to pop at." The school's understanding is very clear. It's them and the planning team together against the local community, Bristol taxpayers. It doesn't want the community to have a chink to pop at. But public authorities must act and be seen to act fairly. And planning issues should be considered on their own merits, avoiding bias, political or otherwise. By this stage, and going into early November, Cotham appeared to be pretty comfortable that it could influence all kinds of matters at the council. So, on the 9th of November, we have an email from the school which covers a number of live issues. I'm just going to pick out a couple of them for the moment. First, about the signs that Cotham had put up in July 2018. The school was required to make a planning application for one of those signs, and due to the controversy the signs had created, the application was called in for decision by the Development Control Committee. Just look at what this Cotham governor had to say. "Are you going to agree to this request? It doesn't seem quite right. If you do, we might usefully consider which committee this goes to. It may be better to delay until the community have been told we're going back." What should we make of that? Is it appropriate that this governor feels able to suggest how the planning team should respond to a call-in by an elected councillor? Is it appropriate for her to suggest that she should have a say in which committee it gets heard by? The application being referred to here was the only occasion in this whole saga where a decision was put to councillors rather than being taken by officers in the planning team, precisely because of that call-in. So what happened? The school's application was rejected. Councillors took the view that the sign was detrimental to the amenity of the listed building, that BCC had been negligent as landowner, and that the issue of curtilage should be reassessed. This is the meeting at which one councillor said that he had never known a school to go to war with a community like this, and others emphasised that Stoke Lodge is both public land and playing fields at the same time. One other remarkable thing about the school's 9th of November letter. It also includes a request for a meeting to discuss mitigation that the school could submit as part of its appeal against the council's previous rejection of its pavilion application. Is the school asking council officers to help it to win its appeal, even though the appeal is against the council itself and includes asking for costs? Is it effectively expecting officers to act against the interests of the council? Going back to the letter from the school's planning consultants, it said that the council's confirmation on the 13th of July that the land was curtilage had pivotal and devastating consequences for the school. Actually, that decision just helped to determine whether or not a planning application would be required. It should not be devastating to have to make a planning application. That just means that equalities issues, tree protection, wildlife issues and heritage impacts get considered. A planning application means that the community's views and needs would at least be taken into account as part of the consultation process. The question is it appropriate for a developer, in this case an academy school, to try to or to be able to influence a local planning authority to the extent that it doesn't need to make a planning application at all.